I do genuinely love working in SEO because it's challenging for me, and I like the feeling I get when I figure something out that like maybe not a lot of people know how to do, and that's intrinsic motivation. So if we're doing something simply because you like it, like you have a YouTube channel, and it's not because like you're wanting to bring in all this cash, because you genuinely love the things that you talk about. And I think when you change the way you think and like why you're doing something, like even if it comes down to something you have to do, how can you shape it to where I was given this opportunity, I'm doing this because this is gonna be beneficial for me, and that makes me happy. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Growing Together podcast with me, Sonny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
A podcast where we talk about everything under the sun related to growth, becoming the best version of yourself, and we're back with another episode today. But before we get into it, how are you feeling today, Cesar? How's your week been?
It's been crazy at work. Been super sore lately because we've been running again. 4th of July it's crazy that 4th of July was just last week, yeah. So.
Well, this past week,
this past Monday. It was
Tuesday.
Tuesday, sorry.
It's weird when a holiday falls on a Tuesday.
I feel like the days are just blending in.
It's all blended.
Yeah, everything's it's weird. Time just different.
Time's an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
I mean, we basically made it up, but that's another thing for another day. But yeah, what Cesar didn't mention is like horror stories of this week is bugs in our apartment.
Oh yeah, bugs.
It's so disgusting. I think the one thing moving from Vegas to Tennessee is the different environment and like climate. It's just so different, because I feel in Vegas, like obviously there's bugs, but I didn't feel like you saw a lot of them, like especially in your homes.
Yeah.
I know growing up in Florida, I always did, but like I kind of had like forgot about it since moving to Vegas, and we had maggots in our like apartment. Luckily not up here, but we have a hallway that leads up into our apartment, so it's like a stairwell, and our front door is at the bottom, and we have a service that's called like the trash fairies that comes and takes the garbage. So you put the bag outside and they'll pick it up Sunday through Thursday. So the only days they don't do pickups is Friday and Saturday. And we had a bag out there. They didn't pick it up. Animal got into it, opened it, and also, I guess, just made the environment for maggots. And the problem is, like, our front door, the like trim, I guess, is broken.
It's like broken, yeah.
And it let them get inside the house, like at the bottom of the stairs, and it was disgusting. So we had the war with the maggots and like spraying bug spray, like doing everything we could find online to get rid of them, which luckily we did. Only to like wake up this morning and me and Cesar were gonna go on a run, so we were just leaving, and we have a closet down there with our shoes to find cockroach eggs. So
yeah,
I'm glad they were eggs and not like actual cockroaches, like live cockroaches, because I would have been really upset and disgusted.
It's honestly just the trim. The trim is broken, so like bugs and stuff.
There's so many bugs getting in.
Yeah, I'd rather not talk about it any further, because it's been
disgusting. It's so bad. Ugh, yeah. It was so gross.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, I think it's been good. Like we've been just living our lives. We got back into running because Cesar and I are going to run a marathon in October here in Nashville. So we're training for that and taking, baby steps. I think we did a 5K today. So we just got to be consistent with that. And
soon.
What, soon?
Soon, like consistency.
I think we have been consistent.
Oh, no, I think we're consistent running. But for me, like running a 5K, not stopping is like, like the goal, the short-term goal right now. Long-term goal is obviously like then 10. And then we could do half before we do the full, because that's like what you have to do before you actually do the full. You have to at least do, I think, 12 or 14 miles. Yeah. And then there's like on and off periods that you do shorter runs, but then you get longer and longer into it. So, yeah, that's why I say soon in regards to.
I think soon. I think sooner rather than later we'll be able to because today we ran 2 miles nonstop, but the total like length of our run was a 5K. We just didn't run nonstop. I think we did from we walked to 0.3 miles, and then from 0.3 to 2.3 is what we ran, and then we cooled down on the way back. So Yeah, I still think that's good progress. Because if I think too much about it, I'll push myself too hard, and that's not going to benefit anyone. So that's just, I gotta like be really like not push myself too hard in that aspect, because then I'll just hurt myself. But before we get into the episode, I wanted to mention, because I never mentioned this in the beginning and I always wait till the end, and I'm not sure how many people are here by the end of the episode, is if you're watching on YouTube, please subscribe. It does help. And honestly, yeah, we just want to continue to build our audience and like make content that people like and want to listen to. So if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, like this podcast, tell your friends, tell your family. And if you're listening on like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, just leave us a review. I think it's super helpful. You know, we all want to grow here. This whole podcast is based on growth, and we can't do that without feedback.
Yes.
We can reflect, but it's always helpful to have feedback. But today, I wanted to talk about, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. Did you take a psychology class in high school?
No, I did not. Yeah.
Surprising.
Yeah. I've read a couple books though, but this was like years ago on psychology. It wasn't like anything in depth, but.
Yeah. So I took a psychology class in high school, and I remember this specific topic, and it's this idea of intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. I want to focus more on intrinsic motivation today, but like to understand intrinsic, you also need to understand what extrinsic motivation is. So like, do you know what either of those are?
I've never heard of it, but based on the word, if I had to guess,
it's like intrinsic, based on the Latin root of this word.
Breaking down the word just in my head, intrinsic means like internal, and was it?
Extrinsic
is external. Like there's external things that motivate you to do something. And
you're
there's
very
internal
smart
things.
in that you're able to like kind of break down context clues. I remember learning in like elementary school, like, figure out what the word means by using the context clues around the sentence. That was so hard for me, and like Cesar just did it in like seconds. Well, you're on the right path. So intrinsic motivation, like if you're intrinsically motivated, you're doing something not for like the like external reward. You're doing it because you enjoy it. Like this is something that brings you like self-fulfillment. Whereas extrinsic motivation is like something that you're getting something out of it. So like we work because we get money out of it. You get good grades because you need to go to college. That's all extrinsically motivated. Like you may not enjoy doing it, but you're doing it because of the reward at the end.
Okay, I see.
So I think the reason I thought of this, because I have a book called it's like 101 essays that will like change the way you think, and I was trying to think of like what we were going to talk about on the podcast episode. I'm like, okay, let me just open this book, and this is like something you don't have to read in chronological order because they're just a bunch of essays. And I open this page and it just says everything is here to help you. How intrinsically motivated people become the best versions of themselves. And it had been a while since I had like taken, I didn't take psychology in college. I took it like in high school. So I had to remember like what intrinsic means and what extrinsic motivation is. And I started to think about how like, I think for the most part in our lives, we're living for the external like factors, like, or we're doing things because we're extrinsically motivated, and not because we actually want to do those things, which can make you feel like you're not in control of your life because basically someone else is dictating your life.
I would partially agree with that. I mean, there are things in my life in the past where I was internally motivated to do something, and there was but there's also external factors like money or exposure, things like that, that would help me in my career growth or in some kind of like personal goal, right? When we set personal goals, like for example, like mine a couple years ago was I wanted to run a full marathon.
Yeah.
And I got close to it, and then I stopped.
Yeah.
So there was like the external motivator for me was like I wanted to actually run and hit this goal.
That's not like external. That would be an intrinsic.
Oh, internal. But then there's I guess for me was like being able to say that I ran one is like an external one. So if anyone ever asks me, like that's
so
the external
what was the
thing.
sole reason that you were doing it? Because you wanted to be able to tell people?
No, it was because I wanted to
push
for myself,
yourself.
be able to say like I actually ran a full marathon.
Yeah,
And then,
so you were intrinsically motivated to do that because
Yeah.
it was something that was gonna bring you a sense of satisfaction and itself. Also, probably like prove to you that you're capable of like pushing yourself hard, and that's like intrinsic motivation. And I'm not saying like the thing is I'm not saying that we aren't like intrinsically motivated at all. I think everyone is to some degree, but it's not like the driving factor in like what motivates us on the day-to-day, which I think it should be. That's kind of where this conversation is going, as I think there's a huge value in changing the way we think and becoming more intrinsically motivated to do the things that we do in our daily lives than purely doing it because we have to. I mean, obviously there's things we always have to do, but it comes down to like the way we think about our, it's like trying to I'm blanking on how to say this, but the way we think about our why, like why we do things. I think when you were saying that you wanted, you had planned to run the marathon, and then I asked you like, oh, did you do it because you wanted to tell people? And you're like, no. If you actually ask yourself, I think something that we don't do is ask ourselves why in a lot of cases of like, oh, I want to do this. Well, why do you want to do this? And like you can ask that question even after you get the answer. Like, oh, I want to run a marathon. Why do you want to run a marathon? Well, because I want to prove to myself that I can finish something. Why do you want to prove to yourself? And you'll uncover like deeper meaning and value as to why you actually want to do something. I don't think that people do that often. I mean, how often do you think you actually ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Or what?
I mean, it's funny that you bring that up because I used to do it a lot. I used to do it all the time, actually. I would never frame it in that way. I would just, like, a couple years ago, it was just like whether it was work or something like that. It was like, why do I want to like accomplish X, whatever it was, whether it was running, whether it was work related, whether it was me making something physically or writing something, or creating content, whatever the case was. For me, I always had the why, like I need to do this because I want to hit X, whatever that was. With running, for me, I wanted to run because it made me feel good. So that was the reason why. Like I liked running. Was like I run because I feel really good at the end of it, during it. And obviously it's good for your health, right? But you can't overwork yourself, which is one of the other things that I'd love to talk about if we find a way to talk about that in this podcast. But if it's okay, and knowing like when your body's telling you things, right? But yeah, and that was for me. I would always ask myself that, whether it was a relationship that I was getting into, like obviously us being together.
It's like, why are we together?
Yeah, but then there's like. Yeah, all of that. There's, I think we should all ask ourselves certain questions on like why.
I think that
things
like
are
yours
certain
was
ways.
very like surface level though, because like if you just ask yourself the why, like, oh, I want to do this, and you're like, because this, and then leave it at that, that's still not really digging into like the actual like why, because you can go like under the surface. Yeah. And the reason I also thought about this and like how I think like this ties in kind of to intrinsic motivation is because I had my quarterly review this week, which I think is just like an awesome thing to do at a company, is to have like quarterly reviews versus annual, because you can see how you improve quarter over quarter versus like year over year, which I think it's important to know like the like tinier milestones you're making and like the time, like just measuring yourself on like a shorter time period too. And part of our quarterly conversations are like we have one meeting where we talk about like feedback we got from like our fellow team members and then from our managers and overall like how you did, right? And then the second meeting goes into like setting personal goals. And then also like they want like to basically kind of connect your personal goals to like what you do at work and like make it like matter. And my manager was like, you're probably going to get frustrated during this process during the next meeting because I'm going to ask you why. Like, why do you want to do that? And she's like, you might realize that you don't know. Like, you don't know why you want to do something. Like, do you want to do it because, like, that's what you think you're supposed to do? Or is there actually a good, like, valid reason as to why you want to do something? And she had shared with me, like, my manager had shared with me that, like, her big thing in her why is to be a present parent. And for one, like, I think that's just so beautiful because I think that that's what all parents should want to be, is to be present with the kids. So that kind of like just, my heart makes so warm. But she explained to me, she goes, if I'm not able to be a present parent, like my job's also not going to satisfy me, you know, because I'm not taking care of like something else I need. You know, in order to be like successful at work, I need this as well. And it's something I love about the company I work for, because they want to make sure that like what you're doing, even in your job, is fulfilling and able to help you fulfill your other reasons, like your whys, your personal whys, is to like, okay, I want to set a personal goal of, I don't know, I'm still trying to figure out mine, but you may want to set a personal goal of like, I don't want to, you know, just focus better on like my mental health. And so what does that look like in the workplace? Well, it looks like managing your work in a way that's not going to overwhelm you, like setting yourself up for success and that kind of thing. So I think that's important, because we just don't, I don't know, I don't think we ask ourselves like why we want certain things, and then if we dig deeper into, I feel if we dig deeper into the whys, we get to the heart of like what we feel our purpose is, you know, and there's also a lot of things that you might realize that you were doing just because, for absolutely no reason, or because you thought that you should do them. Like, I was thinking when it came to like my quarterly goals too, like they ask you like what your current role is, and then like where you want to be, like, you know, what's your desired like future role. And even that, like, I found was hard for me, because I was trying to think back, because I knew that my manager's going to ask this question, like, well, why do you want that? And I'm trying to think, well, why do? Like, what do I want out of this life? And it becomes just a hard, like, it's hard to actually really get to know, like, other than obviously the external factors of like, okay, well, I need a job because I need to have money, I need to have a roof over my head, I need to fulfill my basic needs. But after that, after your basic needs are fulfilled, like, what else, like, why do you, if you fulfilled your basic needs, you got to ask yourself, like, well, what purpose do you have, like, continuing on other than, like, those basic needs? Like, you know, like, I don't know if that makes any sense. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get you. So, yeah, if you have, like, for example, talking about basic needs, you have a job, right? You make X, and your basic needs are a certain amount, but you make more than that, then, like, it would be smart, and you would ask yourself, like, what should I do with this money, the extra money I have? It'd be smart to put some away in the savings account, maybe some sort of, high yield savings, so an IRA, maybe invest some money into the stock market, especially if you're single. You know, if you're single, probably don't have any expenses. But then once you get married, obviously.
What do you
things
mean?
like
If you're single, you don't have any expenses? Like,
no,
they
you
don't
have
need
as
to
many.
live?
No. Of course, I'm just saying. I'm not saying as many expenses as a person that's with someone else.
Well, that's assuming that they share finances.
There you go. So if they don't, well, let's say they are the sole provider, or maybe their other partner is a sole provider, then there's that. There's a whole different scenario. But what I'm saying is that you're thinking of the why, like, oh yeah, I should probably put some extra money aside for a rainy day. If you have a pet, you know, having pet insurance. Should I get pet insurance? Or your car breaks down, you know, like those sorts of things. Like, thinking that's a good thing to think about as to like a why, as to why you should put money away. And that's just like the financial, talking about like the financial things of it.
But like what I'm thinking about though too is, when you're saying that, is like a lot of the whys you mentioned is like, oh, well, like, they're extrinsically motivated, like, of, okay, well, I need to put this money away, because you might be thinking, well, I need to be able to live after I retire, or I need to be able to retire. And that's like an extrinsic motivating like factor.
Yeah.
Whereas I think you can kind of reshape it to be intrinsically motivating, where you're like, well, I need to save this money because I don't know, there's a way to like, my whole thing is that I think with like intrinsic motivation, I think you can change a lot of like extrinsic motivation to intrinsic by just shaping the conversation and like the reasons you're doing things differently. Mm-hmm. So like what I was thinking about when like reading about this and just even in this conversation is that I said like most of us, we have jobs, not because we have to, we need to provide for ourselves. But as we've talked about on this podcast, I'm a huge advocate for having a job that you love, because then you're more intrinsically motivated to, show up every day and to do the work because it's something that you love to do. It doesn't mean it's not work. It just means that you enjoy what you do because you feel like you're fulfilling a greater purpose. A huge thing with me is that I tend to look for opportunities where I feel like I can grow. I'm not going stagnant. And that I feel as if I'm contributing to something great or I'm making a great impact. And that's kind of like extrinsic motivation, but at the same time, I'm also doing something that I love. Like, I do genuinely love working in SEO because it's challenging for me, and I like the feeling I get when I figure something out that, like, maybe not a lot of people know how to do. And that's intrinsic motivation. So if we're doing something simply because you like it, like you have a YouTube channel, and it's not because like you're wanting to bring in all this cash, it's because you genuinely love the things that you talk about. And I think when you change the way you think and like why you're doing something, like even if it comes down to something you have to do, how can you shape it to where I was given this opportunity, I'm doing this because this is gonna be beneficial for me, and that makes me happy. Like, I think it can be a mixture of like extrinsic and intrinsic, but overall just like, pushing you forward. Because I think the thing about extrinsic motivation is if you read about it, it's not lasting. If you talk about it in the workplace and like, say you're extrinsically motivated and you work 60-hour weeks because you want to get a promotion. You'll probably get that promotion, but how long is that high going to last, really? How long is that going to fulfill you? For the most part, it's not going to fulfill you for a long time, whereas if you're intrinsically motivated to do your job, it's going to be fulfilling,
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, you can shift some goal or something that you want or maybe that you need or yeah.
Something that you need. Like, obviously, there are things in this life that we need. It comes down to, like, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like, there are things like we need, like, safety, security, and, like, this, like, basically what we have now, like a roof over our head, food to eat. Like, those are things that we need. But apart from that, like, then you go to the next level of, like, okay, well, I have my basic needs, and then this is the next step of, like, okay, how do I fulfill, like, the other things? But you can change it to where, like, even if, like, this is something you have to do for your basic needs, like, shaping is like, oh, I have the opportunity to do this. It's not, like, it comes down to, like, when I was reading the 101 Essays That'll Change Your Life, the one that says everything is here to help you, how intrinsically motivated people become the best versions of themselves, it talks about how, like, there are people who live out there that are, like, that think that our experiences are created for us, that we don't have a say in, like, what happens in this life. And then there are people who feel that they create those experiences. And so you either see yourself as a victim of, like, what happens to you, or as someone who is given an opportunity to, like, change, grow, and learn. So I think it's, like, we talk about this a lot, but it's a shift in mindset. Like, even bad things that happen, like, take the maggots, right? Like we talked about in the beginning of the episode. Like, it probably, if we want to put it in a great light, was a great reminder that, like, we need to obviously check downstairs, and, like, now we're a little bit more cautious of how easily bugs can get into our house,
If
so,
you
like,
get a trash can.
Yeah, so it's like, but you also, like, if you're someone who, like, sees things just happen to you, you can be like, damn it, like, this sucks. And, like, you might not see, like, the value of, like, that thing happening could be for the good. Like, you remember, like, you hear those stories where it's like, oh, I left late for work and I'm glad I did because there was a huge accident or something, and it's those things that, like, a lot of times everything seems like an inconvenience, but it could be happening for the right reason, It could be saving us from those things, or even something bad that did happen to us could prepare us for, something better. So I think that was something that like really stuck with me, is that it's really easy to fall into the trap of like bad shit just happens to me. I'm not even gonna lie. I think for a majority of my life, I lived that way because I heard it from my family. Like I heard it from like my parents. Like we would be like just having hard times, tired with money, and I thought I would always think to myself, I was like, why does this shit just happen to us? Like it's always us. Like we're destined to like just live a terrible life. And I think when you tell yourself that, like obviously, yeah,
you're going to see the things, and things are gonna happen to you,
and everything's gonna be shaped in a negative light. I think even if good things happen, you'll just think negatively about them. You might not see the beauty and like the great things, and even in the bad things. Like it sucked when we had to deal with the bugs, but it also made us like aware of like things maybe we wouldn't have considered, and put us in a better place to take care of it. So it's crazy because I just think that for a long time I thought that I was just a victim of like what happens to me, and wasn't seeing I didn't see it as any type of opportunity to really change your path. But I think it's a scary road to be down where
would you say that's like I mean, we're talking about a mentality, right? Like something that you're thinking of, right? Whether it's a change in mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can let me know if I'm wrong about this, because again, it's just a thought. So do you think people can control the way they think about things when it happens to them? So instead of them, I think this is basically what you're saying. Like, so if something bad happens to them, instead of being a victim or playing the victim, you can grow from that. That's basically what you're saying, right? Am I right or am I wrong? It sounds like that's what it sounds like to me.
I have like a really hard time with like the term playing the victim, because I do think in this life there are some people that like are victims.
Of course. I mean, there's victims and I think that we like very horrible crimes,
like say
and
things like,
that.
You're playing victims, and we say it in such a harsh way. So I really hate that. Like,
okay, but I mean, it's kind of, but basically what you're talking about sounds very similar to that. That's why
I think that I don't think it's easy. So I want to start with saying I don't think it's easy to really like change the way you think. Like I think that's one of the hardest things to do, is to change the way you see the world and change the way you think. But I think it's possible to like, take those case scenarios where like you were put in a bad situation, or just bad shit happened to you, and change the conversation around it in your head. Like change the way you like, this didn't happen, like basically saying it didn't happen to me, it happened for me. Like it happened for a reason. Or, we've had a couple like not so great things happen since we moved here. Like getting 3 nails in our tires in a series of like 3 months, and it was frustrating at the time. I can't say like I was like, it's so great that we got nails in our tires. Yeah. I'm not saying you got to be like, this is such a great thing to happen. I don't think any person in their sane mind would think that in the moment when these things are happening. But like taking a second to think about it, and like think of maybe why did that happen, and not like why me, why, but like, could this have been for a greater purpose? Is this for a reason? And like maybe not letting it anger you, because I'm guilty of it. I was pissed when those nails got on our tire, and I was like.
Another thing too is that you're a very cautious person about it. So you're like, can I even drive?
I don't want to drive on it.
Can I drive on it? Which you can, depending on what's going on.
I'm not taking any chances. I don't care
if
you tell me I
what
can.
I'm saying is you're extremely cautious about that. So
I think it's hard in the moment to say like, you should just really see, like if someone came up to me and said, think of all how great this is, I'd be like, you're crazy.
Well, isn't that like toxic positivity?
Yeah,
isn't that what that is?
That would be like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a value in like just understanding that, things happen. Like there's just not a world we live in where everything good happens to you. Some bad will happen to you, but it doesn't have to be this thing where you have to accept it for what it is. You can accept it for how do you use those situations to become better? How do you change the conversation in your mind to see it in a more positive light? Because I think the whole thing is, I think it goes back to control too. I think a lot of times in those situations, you just don't feel like you have control. So you just let yourself succumb to whatever life gives you. And like, if you're not actively going after what you want and just going with what's thrown at you, like, yeah, of course you're not going to have a life that you enjoy because you're not going after anything. You're just telling yourself that this is what I deserve.
What about those situations, or maybe, because again, everyone's situation is different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who they hang around with, who their partner is, or all these sorts of things, right? So like, what if they want to go out and do something and they know it's good and they're like, I want to do this, but because of the situation they're in, they may have limitations to.
Can you give like a real example though?
I mean, I can't give one because I can't think of one on from a personal level. But let me think of something.
Well, I just can't, like, you can do a hypothetical, but like that hypothetical is like not what you're saying right now isn't super helpful to like what you mean.
Let's say somebody is this is like more of a millennial / like Gen Z thing. Oh, I wanna be a content creator. And everyone's making fun of them.
Yeah.
Maybe the person that they're with, their girlfriend or boyfriend's like, that's lame. Don't do it.
Yeah.
And because they have let's say they have the time, the resources, obviously, to upload, edit, and they're creative. Maybe they do it on their own. But like, to them, maybe that there's external forces or people or whatever it is that's stopping them from doing it, or telling them like, no, like this isn't the way it needs to be done. Like it should be done this way. But and then next, they just give up. So like, what would you say to those type of people, to those people in those situations that like. In this scenario, in this sense, it's they have the why. Like, oh, I want to do it. I have the reason I want to do it is because X. Like, I want to try to see if I can, or I have talent or a skill that I can showcase to the world via this. But there's those, like you said, like the situations that people get put in, and maybe they lack the motivation, or they just give up, or because it gets hard, or whatever the case is, like, because I know there's a lot of people that like kind of have lived that way, and stuff like that.
The thing about intrinsic motivation is like, it's something you do for you and not for others. So if like, to me, you're not that motivated to do something if it's just that easy to knock you down from doing it, because you're doing it you're motivated to do it because it's something that's going to make you happy. Like, if all it takes then is someone to tell you that you're stupid for doing it, I don't think you're that intrinsically motivated to do it. I don't think you're doing it to fulfill something inside you, because that one or a couple people commenting wouldn't stop you from doing it. I think you'd have to do it for, I'd probably say like in that situation, you're probably more extrinsically motivated, and because like people around you in your external setting don't think so, like it's that easy for them to convince you that you shouldn't do it. The other thing that I thought about when you were talking about that was how I watched a TikTok the other day of this guy who's a like nature photographer, so he has like really cool shots of like lightning, and it's something he loves to do. And so the guy he was sitting down with was asking like, how do you monetize your photos? Because like that's a little bit of different industry of like, how do you make money off of like these really, really cool shots? And he sat down and like he started to say, well, I do want to let you know that like I'm not driven by the money like this could make. She goes, I would shoot these photos like no matter what. Like I don't need to be paid to do this, because he's like, it's something I love to do. He goes, I'll take up like, other photography gigs so that I can do this. And that's intrinsic motivation. It's like, you're going to do it because that's fulfilling something that you love to do. And like, I think when we talk about intrinsic motivation, people like that'll listen to this will probably be like, well, that's just not the reality of the world. We can't all love what we do. And
we know we've heard that a lot.
Yeah, and I think I think that's, I don't want to say it's like completely false. I can see where people come from, but at the same time, I think that you can, how do I say this? Like, I think you can find something that you're intrinsically motivated to do and tie it back to what you do.
Intrinsically.
What you do for you. And yeah, I just think that, yeah, we live in a world that like is very intrinsically motivated. So it's easy to say like, well, we only work to, well, I only have a job because I need to make money. It's like, yeah, but what if you thought about it as like, I want to do this because I want to, um,
Growing like your career,
no, yeah, growing your career, like,
learn a new skill.
yeah, and that's like when you're intrinsically motivated to do something, you do a better job because it's something that's going to fulfill something else in your life. And it is true. The thing is, like, I was seeing some videos this week too that were like, your job can't be like what fulfills you, right? But I think it can be a portion. Like if you mix it with like, again, that intrinsic motivation of like doing something you love because it's going to, no matter if you were getting paid for this, like obviously you want to get paid for that because you need money, but if it's something you're genuinely interested in, like you're going to find so much more enjoyment out of it. And the reason that I'm so for, liking what you do or loving what you do is because we spend so much time at work. So how does it make sense to have something that you just hate doing? I don't think you'll ever be like, I shouldn't say this. I was going to say I don't think you'll ever be a happy person if you just stick with a job you hate. But now that I say that, I think you can if you tie it back to intrinsically motivating factors. So maybe you are doing this job because, yes, you need money, and that's extrinsic motivation. But the money that you're making is going to make your family happy, and it's going to make them, it's going to make for a better life, and that's intrinsic motivation. That's satisfaction for you. That fulfills a purpose greater than yourself within you. So I think you can tie the extrinsic to like an intrinsic motivating factor as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, like we've all had jobs that were, not like the last thing you'd do, whether it was like retail or maybe some people do that and they're become high level managers or whatever the case is, and they're happy in what they're doing, and there's that. But for some that they see it as like a stepping stone in what they want to do, they could use like those skills and like really think about like, oh, maybe I want to grow. Like if you work retail, it'll help me grow in people, like it'll help me grow in my people skills, learning about how to talk to people. Maybe you want to sell them on something if you're like working like a shoe sales position, or you're an automotive retail or whatever it is. And it helps you understand more about like a passion you might have or something like that. So
that's interesting too that you say that, because when I worked in retail, I'm an introvert and I'm very shy. But the like retail side of me, you would never know, because I was always talking to guests and I was always like doing things that made me so uncomfortable. But it did help me grow, like working in those environments where, you're out of your comfort zone, and I had to talk to a bunch of people on the daily. It's just, it's a great, like, if you see it as an opportunity to just become a better version of yourself, like maybe it's not like it also doesn't have to be your end goal, but maybe it's going to fulfill something that you need right now. Like retail definitely helps me become more like kind of confident in myself. Like I haven't mastered confidence. I still am like, feel like I'm an imposter sometimes, but it did show me that I was capable of much more than I ever thought I was. And I remember like this week I had it was either this week or last week, I had a moment with a coworker, and she was like, I was like, yeah, I have the worst imposter syndrome. And she was like, really? Like you would never notice. You're so confident. And I was like, it's a disguise. Like, because I can act like the most confident person in the world. Like most of the time you won't know unless I share it with you, because in environments where like I have to put that like kind of not, I don't want to say facade, but it kind of is a facade. In environments where I have to show up and show out, I'm going to, but it may not be it may not be how I actually feel inside. Sometimes I present myself like really confidently in front of clients, and then I get off the call, I'm like sweating and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, and you would never know. But yeah, I just think it's interesting, like how, if you see, you can just change the way you see especially where you're currently at. I think that we can get so wrapped up in focusing on where we want to be and not thinking about the purpose of where we currently are. And I'm very guilty of that because I like to move fast. I want to be at the next level. Actually, I want to skip some levels. Like, that was the other thing. I was doing my quarterly goal planning, and like, it's like, okay, your desired role. And like, we have like a, what they call like nurture path, and it shows you what like the different levels of like where your career could go within like your current team. And I was thinking, I was like, well, what if I just put like director of SEO as like my desired role? Like, is that like possible? I'm like, I didn't know the timeline. If it was like, when am I expecting this? Like, should I put that? Or, is that stupid of me to like, be like, that's what I want at this moment? Because I've always been someone who's like, yeah, I want to do that. And you may not think I'm capable of it right now, but I won't ever put myself in a position to fail. You know, like, if I want something, it's because I know I can do it. And that was the most frustrating thing too, is when I worked at Target, I really thought that that's where I was going to end up. So as a closing team lead, I obviously wanted to be an executive like team leader because that was the next step. And I was getting like told no, basically. Like, there were some things I needed to work on. And I was like, I don't think you understand that if you put me in the position, like, I won't let myself fail. I can't let myself fail. Like, it's not a part of me. You know, so it's not to say I don't fail, but like, I will give my everything to something. And I consider myself someone who could learn. So it was always so frustrating because I was, again, like, I felt like I didn't have control of it. Like, I know what I'm capable of, but because I have to showcase that to someone else, like, you know, we had differing opinions on what I was capable of. But yeah, it's crazy. And, you know, I don't know. It's just really interested, like, what motivates us. Like, what do you think currently motivates you in like your day to day?
It's funny that we talk about this and talk about like intrinsic and extrinsic, right? I think an extrinsic thing for us right now is obviously I want to make sure that we have a roof over our head, so we need money. That's a big factor. But intrinsically, I do have goals and passions about like content. So for me, that's where I tie back on an intrinsic level, is like, what can I do and how can I fulfill the dream that I have of like creating or starting up like channels from scratch. So that's like one of my goals for when I work.
It's interesting too, because like what you do for work, like what you make money to do, is very relevant to like what you do for your passions. And I think that's something that, like, while you're doing like this job partially extrinsically because you need money, you're also doing it because it aligned with what interests you and what piques your interest.
Exactly.
And like the same thing like with my job is like, I love my job, and that makes it sound like I had a gun to my head. I really do love my job. But I think about it as like an opportunity, like, this environment will allow me to grow, and it'll allow me to like learn things I didn't know and maybe couldn't have learned by myself. You know, like, it's an opportunity for, honestly, I think it just opens up a wide variety of opportunities that can then help me on like my personal level and on my passion projects, like with this podcast, or like with I don't know, like if I wanted, I know that if I wanted to build my own site right now, I could, because I definitely know, you know, the ins and outs
and stuff
of
like that
SEO
and
like that stuff. Like, it's crazy because maybe that's not like, I think it's valuable to me now, but like there are things that you can learn that may have not felt valuable at the moment, but then like when someone asks a question, you're like, I know that. Or like when you need it for like some other not connected like reason, you're like, man, this is so good that I had this experience right here, because now I can do, you know, this.
Yeah, it's a stepping stone to like your whatever it is that you want to do next. You know, whether maybe it's within the same company you're working for now, or maybe it's something entirely different or similar to what you're doing now. But yeah, I think it's important for us, all of us, to have some sort of like goal. So like for right now, for example, I'm really glad we're getting back into running. It's something for me that I've wanted to get back into for like the longest time, and there are intrinsic things that I think of in my head, like goals and stuff like that. But there's also the extrinsic. That's why I always bring it back to like why I did it in the first place. And it's good that we're talking about like why we do things. But there's also the, like, again, it's a mental battle, especially when it comes to anything physical. You know, if you're, whatever it is that you want to do, then requires like you to like lift, or maybe you have like a goal that you want to hit where you want to like bench press like a certain amount of weight or whatever the case is. But there's still challenges though. That's the thing. There's things that you can't control, that you have to deal with, and just find a way to work around for you to get to that goal. You know, there's only so many things that we can control, or whatever the case is. So, yeah.
Yeah, there's only so many things we can control, but the control that we do have and the things that we can't. This is so confusing. The control that we do have when there's things that we can't control is how we react.
Exactly.
In those situations.
Yeah.
So
I can give you an example actually, because talking about running. So like, yes, like for me, for example, if I was planning my own way to do a marathon, I even have a spreadsheet from when I was timing myself and doing my things. I'm a very analytical person when it comes to like things, so I would do it that way. Like, I need to wake up at X time. I need to run this much. I need to make sure I'm rolling my ankles and my shins, and so I don't get shin splints. So I need to make sure I take glucosamine, which I am, to avoid injuries. Like, listen to your body. Your body says it's sore. Maybe you should take a rest. Things like that. I would, do all sorts of different things, but because we're doing it together as a couple, now I have to still do that to a certain extent, but also keep in mind like the way that you also want to do it too. Yeah. Because you're different. Again, like today, for example, it reminded me like at the end we had like 1 mile left. And I was we had less than 1 mile left. It was like, I think like 0.75. And I was ready to just go. I was like, let's go. Like, I'm going to finish this off strong. But because Sonny, and also external factors, again, there's random strangers running on this trail we're on. I don't know what's going on. Like, I need to make sure that you're okay. So there's that. So I'll run and then I'll stop and slow down. Like, oh, okay, she's fine. And then I'll be like, okay, I'm just going to start walking. But if it was me, I would have just booked it.
No, there was one point where Cesar was like, I told Cesar, like, okay, let's run. Like, let's try to run the last of this. But like my run is, Cesar was like, I thought you meant like run. I was like, I was running. Like, what are you talking about? And like, but like we even had different versions of what that looked like, of like what finishing off strong looked like. But yeah, that's it's just how you react in the situation. Like, you can either,
because I could have been like, no, I'm gonna run, I'm gonna do my own thing. But screw
Cesar
you.
Just adapts.
Like, no, I'm just like, I'm gonna. I
that's
have
the
to
thing
adapt.
Is like how you react and how you adapt, and that's the thing is something. It's funny because before I thought of this podcast idea, I was thinking about like there's a like topic called like evolve or dissolve, like how you have to evolve and like adapt to situations, and I think that's definitely a good scenario there. Is like you have to adapt to like what, the things that we can't control. So what do you do now? Like it makes you have to, take a detour, figure out a way around or even through, depending on what happens. And yeah, I think too, like, because I asked you like what currently motivates you, like I think what motivates me, I think right now at this moment I am very extrinsically motivated, but that's more to do with needing to still like be more in tune with like who I am and like self-love and stuff, because I think I've thrived off external validation for a very long time, and that's not very good long term, and I definitely still really care a lot about what people think of me. So I can't say that I'm fully like intrinsically motivated to get up and do a great job. I think part of it is intrinsic, but I know another part of it is that I don't want to disappoint other people, and like I don't want people to think bad of me. And I don't know if it's necessarily like so bad to like have those thoughts, but sometimes I think that they can be a little bit overwhelming, and it almost becomes stressful. I think like with being extrinsically motivated, sometimes you're more stressed because things have to be a certain way. You know, like I used to get stressed about, I still do sometimes, about the idea of, you know, sometimes just needing to survive. Like, you know, like there's so much we need in order to survive, and obtaining those things like money and like a roof over your head, it can be very stressful. You know, it can be very disheartening when you work so hard and all your money goes to bills. You know, like, so sometimes I know that it feels like I fall victim to just like that routine of like, I have to do this because I need money, and then I become like less, you know, involved with like I become less aware of like what my original why was. You know,
like
I
you
become
lose your
less
why.
aware. Like, you lose your why. Is like, why were you doing this in the first place? So I think you constantly have to remind yourself that there is bigger purpose there, because otherwise, I think you'll burn yourself out. You won't be happy. And I know that I've definitely been there before. I think leaving my last company, like, I was very driven to be the best at what I wanted to do, and I don't think that's a bad thing, but I was also driven to like want other people to see that, and so much so that I would just like destroy myself. You know, I was burning myself out, and it damaged me going. I feel like it damaged me going into a new job because I didn't go. I felt like I could have even been like way stronger if I just would have like created like better boundaries and just remembered again like what do you want to do, why do you want to do it, and like how do you make that happen, you know, and just tying it to the things that actually make you happy. Because obviously, like I said, if you need a job and you need money, that's one thing, but like what are you going to like, how do you make that something that brings you fulfillment also and brings you happiness?
Exactly.
So I think it's interesting. I think it's definitely interesting what motivates us at the end of the day, and like how we, like, again, like how we're all motivated. Or like, you know, you hear sometimes that that person's just not motivated to do anything, and that's just that's not necessarily true. It's just like we don't know what motivates like others. You know, we're all different, especially with the different types of motivation. You know, you've seen those some people when like say like because we're gonna run a marathon. Something that motivates you might be like people cheering you on, while other people need like some very tough love talk, like don't be a wimp. Like some people that motivates them, like when they're hearing like that tough like love kind of talk. For me, like that would make me cry, but like for others it works. So I guess it's just finding what works for you too.
Yeah, of course.
That's been today's episode. We hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you'll tune in next week for another episode. I promise that we'll get more consistent with posting. It's just been a little bit wild lately.
Yes.
Just crazy with a lot of things happening in our life, but this is something that I am intrinsically motivated to do. So I will continue to do it, whether or not people watch or not. So this has been Growing Together with me, Sonny Vasquez.
And me, Cesar Santos.
We hope to see you again next week.
See you guys later.